Welcome to the first episode of Zero Balancers from around the world. Let's find out who is practicing zero balancing and how they first came across it and why they love it so much. First up is my good friend and fellow zero balancer, Wendy Leach.
Hi everyone.
So, yeah, please introduce yourself.
Well, James, thank you very much for asking me to uh, be involved in this interview. So I'm Wendy Leach, and I live in Cornwall in England, and I have been practicing therapies probably since about 1986, I think, one way or another. Um, And therapies have always been in my life. They've always been part of my life. And I met zero balancing in 2004 or 2005. I have a practice in Cornwall. I've always worked part-time as a nurse or a tutor, and I've always had my therapies as a side to that as well. And when I met zero balancing, it's something that's just become part of my life.
Nice one. How did you first come across zero balancing?
Well, I had always wanted to move my practice west in Cornwall, and I was had a pull to go to Falmouth. So I started working in a practice in Falmouth. I signed up for 6 months. I used to travel for an hour once a week, and I hadn't been there very long. And I picked up a magazine, which I think there was an article in there about dancers and zero balancing, which I found very interesting. At the time, I was practicing then spinal touch and I think massage. And it just so happened that there was an acupuncturist there, Anna Colmer, who was also zero balancing practitioner and teacher. And so we did a swap, um, and I got hooked after my first session. It was more than amazing. It was mind blowing.
Yeah, so tell us more about that first session. What was your first experience of receiving zero balancing like?
Well, I don't think I'd ever had a therapy that didn't need you to take your clothes off, first of all. So that was quite attractive to me. Um, Having read the article as well about the benefits to dancers, I was intrigued to know what it felt like to have something done to your body, which wasn't massage and it wasn't anything else that I'd ever experienced before. And when I got off the table, Anna asked me to walk around, which I did. And she said, let's have a little chat. How do you feel? What do you feel? Is there any experiences? And I just recall that I described the feeling as if I'd been compartmentalized. So every part of my being had fit into a little compartment. So everything was organized and there's no chaos anymore. But I felt like that everything had been put into a matchbox. And I remember that very, very distinctly. A matchbox. I mean, how small is a matchbox? And I was also incredibly hungry. So yeah. So I said, look, I need some food. I'll come back and I need to know more about this. And before I knew it, I'd stepped in. She was running a first workshop. I didn't know it was a first workshop. I just knew it was a workshop in Cornwall. And I knew that I needed to do it. And I signed the papers. I signed up. And across the table, Anna said, so you really are committed then? And thinking to myself, well, yeah, it's 9 months down the road. It's not too bad, is it? So she said 3 years, committed to 3 years. That's how long it could take. It could take longer. And again, I remember thinking, okay, 3 years, however long it takes, this is what I want to do. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's how I started. And I did have some very bizarre um, experiences after that as well, which I can only leave down to the zero balancing, because I did then have another 2 sessions. And when I say bizarre, it was just things that came back from my past, um, that I didn't quite understand, but I realized that something had been brought up that perhaps I just either needed to look at or acknowledge and then let go of.
Hmm. Wow, that's powerful.
Very powerful. Yeah.
So, how would you describe zero balancing?
Well, it's it's a combination. I've had chiropractic sessions before. I've never had osteopathy, and it's a combination of being held in a meaningful way, um, and being held in a way that is so deep that it goes beyond words and feeling. I don't know whether that's a very good description, but it's as if somebody is allowing you to be who you truly want to be or need to be, and without you actually having to question that.
Wow, cool. I like that. So, how have you personally benefited from receiving zero balancing?
um, I've always, from the age of about 30, I've been on a journey of self-discovery and self-development, and however, whatever form that has taken in life, I've always felt drawn to something. And zero balancing for me has benefited me at such deep conscious, subconscious levels, um, that I've had to face myself. I've had to face things in life. I've had to, well, I haven't had to do it. I could have walked away from it. But zero balancing has been the key to opening doors for me, um, and giving me opportunities to either explore something new or to rediscover something that was already there in me.
Nice. So now a more sort of pragmatic question. Who are zero balancing workshops for?
Who are they for?
Who are they for?
They are for anybody. Um, I mean, there's different types of workshops. So you have the workshops that are, I suppose, specifically for the practitioner. So a practitioner who may be working as a massage therapist, qigong, somebody who's maybe in some of those modalities. But also there's the workshop for the person who's interested in something different, interested in developing something in themselves, interested in learning more about structure and energy. And then there's the workshops, which the associate teachers teach, which is for people who may have already received zero balancing, or again, might be a practitioner in other modalities and has an interest in wanting to know more about the principles of zero balancing.
Nice one. So you've already touched on this a little, but I'm curious to know how you might answer this question in isolation. Is why did you decide to study zero balancing?
That's an interesting question. Because at some level, I was touched so deeply that I knew I'd found the thing that I'd been searching for. And once I had started along that path and started, yeah, working with Anna and Phil, it was just a journey that I just so thoroughly enjoyed and learnt so much more, not just about myself, but about energy and how energy can affect us individually, collectively. And I had some experiences during those workshops, so it just validated for me some of the things that I had felt in the past. And I was able to, now having gone through those workshops or been that very first workshop, understood what it was like and how important it was to work at Interface.
Okay, cool. So, if someone's already trained in a touch-based therapy, what does zero balancing have to offer that's different?
I think it teaches you to work from a place of being present, really present. And just from my own experience of working with people have illnesses where they have depleted energy, and how in the past, before I met zero balancing, how that had been affecting me at the time. And since meeting zero balancing, I don't have any of those issues anymore.
Cool. Nice one. Your video froze a bit at my end for a bit, but I think we caught the important bits, so that was good.
Okay.
Um, okay. So what was your first zero balancing workshop like?
My my first zero balancing session. My gosh. Well, there was two of us and there were two teachers. So, whatever happened, we were being looked after and we were going to get the best. And there are two things or three things really that really stand out for me. And one is Interface, is how important working at Interface is. And I remember the first something that we do, which is called the half moon vector. I remember approaching the table, having been taught about interface and ground thing. I approached the table and I picked this person's feet up, and immediately I was physically hit in my solar plexus by something that I never experienced in my life. Phil, the teacher, he asked the person, he asked me to put the person's feet down, and he said to the person on the couch, did you feel anything? What was happening there for you? And she didn't feel anything. And I was literally almost flung across the room. And so we came back to the seated area and we were chatting about it. And what happened, what came out of that conversation was that the person that was on my course was a dancer. And the question Phil asked was, what do you do with your energy normally when you're performing? And she said, well, I project it. And he asked me, what was I doing just before I touched this person? Was I working interface? Was I grounded? Well, I wasn't, because I was more in my head than I was in my body. And I just went and picked this person's feet up to do this half moon vector. And simply because I wasn't grounded, I got I got the full force of this projected energy of this wonderful dancer. And anyway, we went back to the table, and she didn't project her energy. I worked at interface. I was grounded, and it was it was just amazing to see the difference and feel the difference. And the second thing that stands out for me that is that one of the I think we were working on the hip, and as I was working on this person's hip, same person, I heard this noise, but it wasn't a noise from outside, it was the noise side. And I said to Anna, I said, "God, did you hear that?" And she said, "No, what did it sound like?" And I said, "Well, it sounded like somebody on a golf pitch that had just hit the ball into a hole, like that pop noise." No, she said, I didn't hear it. So I moved to the next leg, and I did some work on the next leg, and I said, "What did you hear that?" That was even louder. And she said, "I haven't heard anything." And this was all going on. This was information coming through my hands, or, from this person. But I was this information was coming very loud and clear. And that was a validation to me that there's much more going on in my hands. And the information is not in my head, it's in my hands, and then it's been translated into something else. And then I have to make sense of that. Yeah. And the third thing is that we had work done on ourselves. So Anna would, Phil and Anna worked on both of us. And I had a specific problem, and I hadn't shared it with Phil. And he found it. And I never had a problem again after that. And that was a physical problem that manifested with symptoms. And after that session with Phil, one session of a full zero balancing, I never ever had those symptoms again.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So there's clearly a lot in what you've already said, and maybe some of that, applies to this next question. And
Okay.
that question is, what is it about zero balancing that has you hooked?
Well, all of those things that I've said, but also it's the meaningful touch. It's being touched by somebody who has a presence, that they're completely present, and there's a trust as well. And the principles of zero balancing. Yeah.
You want to go in a bit more detail about the principles that have you hooked?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because after I certified, I I worked in a big caring organization, and I was in a managerial position. So I had to attend a lot of meetings, and a lot of bureaucracy, and a lot of things going on in a room. So I would always prepare myself before I went into that room by using those principles. And in fact, I used those principles before my interview, and I got the job. And I continue to use the principles, which are to be present, to position yourself in a way that you're comfortable, and the other person is comfortable, making sure that the room is, it's the right space to work in. There's a clear space. And I always found that it's changed the outcome of what could have been different. So there's something about settling into oneself to become present at that time has an effect on the session, whether it be a zero balancing session, a massage session, an interview, being in a meeting, being on a one-to-one with somebody, is just being absolutely present and grounded and at interface. Yeah.
Nice. So, can you please share a zero balancing session or sessions that stand out as a good example of what it can do for people?
Yeah. So I used to, yeah, one does come to mind specifically is a lady in her 30s who had some health issues, and had in the past suffered, I think it's hemiparesis. Paresis. It's where you lose the senses in one side of your body. And I was actually still within the certified program, so I was still within that 3 years. And she was somebody that I used to go and do a massage for. And she rang me and said that she was having this problem where she couldn't feel one side of her body. And I used to go to her home, and I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to massage her. I'm going to try some zero balancing, and I'll work with the protocol. I'll work with what I see in front of me. I'll work with what she's telling me, and I'll just let my hands do whatever they need to do into what I feel. And what really, really surprised me, and again, because I was maybe a little bit more receptive at that time, when I was touching certain points, I was hearing musical tone or musical notes. Now, I don't read music, I don't play music, I'm probably tone deaf, but I knew what I was feeling. So I would just hold that area for as long as was needed. And it was a short session. And when I finished, she said to me, "Can I just ask you a question? When you are holding those places or pressing on those places, what are you feeling?" And I remember saying, well, this sounds very, very odd, but it's not so much a feeling, but it's a sound. It's a sense of a vibration that is transmitted as a sound to me. She said, well, what type of sound is it? And I said, okay, here we go. It's like a musical note. It could be a C, it could be a D, it could be an F. She said, well, when you had your hand or your fingers on that particular place, I think it may have been on her sacrum. She said, what sound was it? And I said, well, it was an F and it needed to be a C. So I just held it until it went from an F to a C. And she said, well, that's astounding. She said, because that's what I felt. And she said, if you go to the drawer opposite the bed, pull the drawer out, there's 2 CDs in there. They're yours. Take them home. They're yours. And she used to sing in a choir, solo. And she said, so when you see, I'm getting goosebumps now. She said, when you were touching me, I could feel the music in my body. I could feel the vibration in my body. She said, and I haven't sung since my trauma, but take those home and listen to them. And that whole session was just validated that what I felt, what I sensed, what I heard was real, and it was benefiting her on a level that I couldn't really explain and didn't really need to explain. And a week later, she rang me and said that within I think it was 48 hours, she'd been able to get out of the bed and shuffle down the stairs. And within the week, she was up again on both feet. She hadn't been able to get out of bed for a couple of weeks prior to me giving her that session.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So that's quite astounding, really.
Yeah, yeah, that's really astounding. Seems a shame that we're now on to the last question. So, if people would like to work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, I'm based in St Stephen's near St Austell in Cornwall. I cover a radius of about 25 miles. I do go out to people if I need to, or if they can't get to me. I have a cabin that I work from in my garden. Up until recently, I was working in a centre, but really that was a bit ad hoc. So most of my work is from home. And you can find me. I don't have a website, but you can find me on the Zero Balancing website.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I really hope you enjoyed getting to know Wendy. You'll find links to Wendy's online presence in the description below. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, or subscribe to give Wendy and Zero Balancing some more exposure. Until the next time, goodbye.